Yo, what's up, world? This is Dane Tomas, and you're listening to the Dane Tomas podcast. Every week, I talk to experts, weirdos, new friends, and old ones about everything from magic to business to creativity and human awakening. So, strap yourself in, lay back and relax, cause we're heading straight for the black hole.
Maybe we could just take a moment to drop in.
Okay, great. You're going to lead the drop in, right? I can't
Sure.
wait. Yes.
Just taking a nice deep breath. And just registering only what is actually present right now. Sensations, whether your body is warm or cool, your weight on the chair, clothing on skin. Just noticing dense base sensations. And allowing those to be exactly as they are. Bringing your attention also to more subtle sensations, whether you perceive those as energies or emotions or more ephemeral textures, lightness, density, tingles, sadness, happiness, just registering whatever is there, whatever is present. Letting that be what it is. Noticing the mind, the self, the I, the construct of you that oftentimes runs the show, and just giving it a nod to hi, me, or at least the part that thinks it's me. And then falling back into the everything else, the bigness, the emptiness that holds all of that stuff, that allows those things to arise, the spaciousness, the depth, the emptiness. And we'll just ease into our conversation from that place of spaciousness and allowing all those other parts to be what they are. So if the mind wants to come in, it can come in, but we're going to register that it's done that and maybe take a more pause between our chats or whatever. But, you know, however it goes is however it goes.
Amazing. Hey, Dane, do you know how to turn off messages?
On like other platforms?
On my iMessage, I'm sure I've just turned it off.
Cool.
Otherwise, we might have a ding, but it's okay.
Yeah, they're all different notifications. I'm pretty bad at that stuff. Ready?
Yes, ready.
Hi, Ava.
Hi, Dane.
What's up? How you doing?
I'm feeling so good and connected, and we just had a little drop in, so that was just lovely. Just what I needed midday.
Great. Yeah. For everyone listening, hi. I'm happy to have Ava Irani on this conversation today. So whether you're watching, whether you're listening, whenever you're watching this in the future, which won't be the future for you, it's just the future for us. It's obviously the present for you. That will be difficult for you to be watching in your own future. Let's not get into that. It gets really confusing. But Ava is someone I've known around for quite a while through the kind of spiritual tantric scene, and then more recently started going to her meditation retreats, in the last year and a half, something like that, a bit more?
A year ago.
Yeah.
Was the first one.
Cool. Yeah. So I first did a retreat with Ava a year ago, but I chatted with her a bit online, and I just kind of got the vibe that she was on some cool non-dual tip. I can say shit because we officially classified these podcasts as explicit on iTunes. They wouldn't let us upload. And I'm like, what the hell? Got to be classified as explicit because they might say shit. But Ava runs the Spanda School of Yoga in Western Australia, runs retreats all over the place. And I wanted to get her on and just dip into like a bit of non-duality, meditation, tantra from the more consciousness end of tantra. And anything else that wants to come in between us is good too, you know? So hi, thanks for doing this.
My absolute pleasure. And yeah, I feel honored to be here, to be one of your cool friends. And happy to just see you and be with you because we were going to see each other this week anyways. And this is another way of us collaborating, because I really feel that when you're on retreat, I just feel that vibe and the collaboration, and it makes me feel like it's community on retreat together. So I think it's a extension of that forum.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoy your containers, and there's something about it, like, you know, there's obviously you're the teacher, so there's a little bit of teacher vibe, which whoever it is, I always try to deconstruct the teacher vibe and not be in teacher vibe with them, but you're the teacher in those containers, and I really enjoy the way that you blend together a few things that they seem like they're on a really compatible frequency. Like, you know, you'll throw in kind of Eckhart Tolle and Ajahn Shanti, and then, you know, kind of Rumi quotes and that sort of stuff, and the Ram Dass kind of stuff, and the heart meditation. It all seems to really, you know, it's like, because people love to mix everything together, and I'm a mixer of everything together, but I feel like I'm quite sophisticated at it, and I'm really super judgmental when people just lump shit together. I'm like, that's not the same. This is the wrong software. You can't put that on that. That's like trying to put an app on your Samsung that's a Mac app. What are you doing?
It's so sneaky though, because if it even has the smallest semblance, everyone's like, you can totally reconcile that. And then somehow you've just gone to the surface where they actually meet up. And yeah, I'm also very picky.
Well, I think that's why I respect you as a teacher, but also I find I got to this place of, I'm less seeking big capital T teachers, you know, like, it's that old guy who's going to give me the whole thing, you know, the old 70-year-old man. He's always usually a man, long beard, you know the deal. Mm-hmm. He's going to give me the whole transmission and I'll finally be complete. I don't really hold a lot of that. And what I'm often more interested in is like other, what I would call like advanced students. And the further I go, the more I'm starting to see like, fuck, that's all there really is, you know, like, that guy that everyone thinks is a black belt, he's actually a blue belt. And the rest of society is so fucking retarded that we think the blue belts are the black belts because there's not really anyone around hardly who's holding that. Anyway, all that to say, I love your particular mixture of stuff that you teach and that you practice. Do you want to just riff on that? Like share what your influences are in your practice and what you blend together really well?
Yeah, totally. I'm so glad that we went into the teacher talk, and I feel like, because, you know, we do silent retreat and then we don't really get to hang out afterwards. So this is like a forum to unpack our relationship and our retreat experience as well.
Totally.
Yeah, because I really want to unpack that teacher dynamic and because you're my teacher, I read your books, I read your blogs, and I really think the way forward is in this. I love that you said advanced student. I like that idea. But this kind of collaboration where, you know, there are going to be things that are more aligned, and there is this kind of hierarchy of things that we're aspiring to, but they're not people. And it's not people, you know, it's not ever meant to be a person. It's meant to be, I don't know, different resonances, different journeys, different tools, modalities, and everything keeps changing. You can't expect maybe there was a time when there was the old guy who had all the knowledge, but with the speed of things that are changing in our day and age, that model is completely gone. And I just think I really want to have that conversation as much as possible, that as quickly as possible we can sweep that model away, because it's so fucking disempowering. And it's so sneaky, and it's just, you know, like satanic, and like just really takes spirituality and you know, takes it totally off course. And I feel like I'm playing a big part in that at the moment. Like my new program that I'm developing is called Functional Spirituality, and it's really so much about it. It started, it's just all happening exactly as COVID and the world just keeps happening and surprising us. So is this new program, and I'm like, oh, this new platform is about me expressing how fragmented I am, you know, how unintegrated I am, you know, and I am the teacher and the leader in the particular community that I'm leading and sharing teachings with. And it's really to normalize how fragmented we all are, and to just to normalize it a little bit more, not to let that be like a small section of us, but just letting, once again, like all of ourselves be more and more felt and known. And I think it's really important for the teachers to do that. But I really like the idea of saying advanced student, because that old framework is so robust. It's just our spiritual teachings, the ancient traditions that we love so much. It's all modeled on that old patriarchal, unfortunately, it also is men that are also the teachers as well. It's not just patriarchy, genderless patriarchy. It's like this old patriarchal model of spirituality that it's so fucked up. It's all of, there were these small gems in it, tiny gems. And then everything else is like power, the state, conspiracies, misconduct and struggles and stuff. Is that what you wanted me to riff on? Or
no, what I was really fishing for, but that was super valuable, is like, what's, if we're backstage of you building your retreat, what are the ingredients? What are the teachings? What are the bits and pieces that you like? Okay, I've got 7 days with these guys. This is the stuff I value that I want them to come and bathe in. What's in the mix?
Well, it does change all the time, because my own spiritual practice is so rich and so, transforming all the time. But what I thought of when you first started to share about the things that you enjoyed, like bringing these little pieces together that did have they were all aligned with the heart-based meditation. The silent retreats that I offer, as you know, and when we first met and started talking about it, they're modeled off of Hridaya. The Hridaya Yoga School and Hridaya Yoga System, which is a style of yoga founded by a man named Sahajananda. And he's still alive, and the headquarters are in France and also in Mexico. They have their other headquarters. And I found Hridaya in 2011 with their flagship 10-day silent meditation retreat. And that was my first exposure also to Tantra and to deep spiritual practice. And what I learned in that first retreat is what I carry through in the heart of my practice right to this day. I'm like fully brainwashed I'm fully inducted into that school because of the emphasis on the heart and the self-inquiry method of Ramana Maharshi. So the heart, the tantric, the non-dual tantric idea of Hridaya being the heart of consciousness, which is our heart and the heart of reality, and this as a link between the individual and the all kind of thing, is at the heart of the retreat. And then anything that aligns with that is welcome. So all different traditions, but kind of pulling out things that keep adding to and emphasizing the heart so that we can all keep going deeper. So all of that is welcome, because the mind loves a lot of different food, but it is actually still taking us right into the heart, which is going to always be the potency of our practice, the truth, that anchors everything else. And then everything else that I want people to bathe in are, like you said, when I'm curating the retreat, it's all my favorite things and all of the things that I found to be valuable in my own spiritual practice. So it might include the work of Byron Katie. It might include things like breath, sound, and movement, yin yoga, functional movement and strength training in the body, journaling, silence, obviously poetry, and some of those like Sufi elements as well. But yeah, if that answers your question, it's really just all my favorite things. And then definitely I have to pay homage to Hridaya, where I'm not so affiliated with the school at the moment, but it's modeled off of what would it be like to give people an immersive experience into the heart of consciousness. Like that's what that's the thing that I love the most. And it's also in my entire spiritual practice and in my entire life, it's been the most significant thing that I've ever come into contact with.
Yeah. Yeah. I found, you know, I got a lot of different practices and schools and flavors. I don't know what I was going to say, up my belt. That doesn't even make sense, you know, on my, you know, in my like repertoire, and some amazing maps for kind of coordinating what gives what, you know, which is really, I feel, helped me and given me more coherence to my pathway than a lot of the people that just, I did a bit of this, I did a bit of that. I'm like, you're fucking crazy. You don't even know what you're running, you know, and so that's been really beautiful. But why I've come back to your retreats and why I'll come back again. There's so many, I'm quite into a lot of magical systems and sort of the mystery schools and esoteric traditions, which fucking love complexity, you know? And there's a lot of spiritual philosophy and stuff that I do find valuable. I find very valuable, but I can't help but notice, you know, the 33 levels of this or you know, the 5 stages. Pardon?
It's that difference between the horizontal and the vertical. Richness.
And like, just, it's all really useful and I use a lot of it, but there's something about dropping into the non-dual reality, access through the heart, that is just like, none of those fucking systems matter. Like from this place, they do in a different, you know, soul journey stuff, which I talk a lot about. It's really useful to climb this ladder, but when it's like, there is no one climbing the ladder. And even, do you remember me asking the last one, like, what's Ramana Maharshi's point of view on the soul? And you're like, nah, it's not even a thing. And I was just like, fuck. And I'm fine that doesn't match some of the other systems that I use and love. And, you know, in the integral model that they divide into basically radical awakening and evolutionary awakening. And that's really helped me of like, okay, I'm really, the practices that you're sharing and this flavor from kind of Toli to Rumi to, you know, there is this sense of just radical awakening to reality right now that, to me, that's really the heart of my spiritual practice on a day-to-day basis. And then there's this kind of like I almost recategorize the other stuff as like my magical practice, you know, which is almost like, you know, it's like a computer game of like ascending the power and abilities of this being, which then goes to this level and another part disintegrates and then it goes to this level. And I love that stuff, but I almost treat it as a different complementary pathway.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And this is so nuanced, you know, this is not anything that I've figured out, you know, and it's just a conversation. And I think each of us has to find it out. And it is ever new, like what we like to categorize it. So what is this spiritual practice? What is my my soul journey or my purpose in this lifetime? And how can you say that one is more significant than the other? And can we really say that they're separate? And is there an overarching spiritual journey that includes both and can't separate them? That's probably where I'd be more inclined, where in the past I was more inclined to say spirituality is about non-dual recognition and abiding in spirit. But more and more where that was definitely Ramana Maharshi's teachings. He even said that that's your purpose journey as well. Like your purpose journey, your personal expression and your spiritual journey are about, like, your deepest service to world is to die into your emptiness, you know? And maybe that was a relevant perspective just 70 years ago, you know? But what is our highest, or like, what does even spirituality mean? Like, I'm thinking about something between a mix of being optimized, you know, including, you know, my revelation of all that is, having that optimized and whatever reason I'm here for also being optimized and recognized, and also something about rest and beauty and being, you know, like all of the spiritual virtues kind of still hold true, of beauty and love and allowing and knowledge and recognition, and experience in its good and bad and all of its multiplicity. Like I reckon all of those spiritual virtues or higher virtues stand true, but how they are practically experienced in this individual experience, in this collective experience at this time, I don't think anyone knows. And I love that you're allowed to say all the things that you just said about, you know, people, you know, I feel like a lot of people are just doing a whole bunch of crazy shit. You know, that's what I always think. I'm like, I know I am judgmental, but I can also see that people are just operating all of these non-congruent spiritual paths. But it's not even that they're non-congruent. It's like, have you clarified the purpose yet?
Yeah.
And have you re-clarified it, or are you just listening to someone else's clarified purpose? It just needs to be way more fresh than that. And that's something about that is what I think spirituality is. So like I said, functional spirituality, something about being functional in this moment and practical, based on this moment. And that's what consciousness is, you know. Consciousness is the freshness and brand newness and relevancy of this moment. The only absolute thing is how relevant this moment is. You know, it's completely, infinitely relevant. But, you know, it is, you know, like you cannot deny how relevant this moment is, and somehow meeting that fully on a personal and on a transcendent and on a collective level. You know, we talk about these different levels in our different systems, but just finding new ways of meeting and recognizing that, I think, is a functional spiritual practice, you know?
Mm. Mm.
I just feel out of body. It's the altar I'm staring at.
Yeah, for those on the audio, I've got my like very magical soul mystery school style altar behind me with a lot of skulls and a lot of pictures of people like in temple space calling in like alternate reality temple magic manifestation stuff. Yeah, well, there's a model that I got from Bruce Lyon, who is a teacher and a friend and an influence of mine, where he really reconciles a lot of big pieces really beautifully with this model of basically, I won't get fully into it, I'll do this another time, but basically using the metaphor of the structure of the universe for our kind of cosmology, and basically using, you know, the earth is your personality, it's your personhood, it's the body mind, you know. The sun is like your soul, it's the transpersonal, it's the archetypal, and the black hole at the center of the galaxy is the non-dual, is the emptiness, is the mystery from which everything else arises. And that, you know, they talk about it in terms of 3 rings. A lot of the rituals and processes we do have been based on that. A lot of the other stuff I'm making at the moment, I'm doing a book called Magical Thinking at the moment. And it's about reconciling a lot of these big maps and how to use them and live them, and use framework that is coherent in your life that allows you to do the maximum level of tweaking your own reality, but actually in a way that sort of is coherent. And that model for me is really beautiful, because the non-dual stuff sits a lot more as a direct path through to the void, through to the timeless reality, you know. So, but in those esoteric teachings, the void access stuff, the black hole stuff, speeds up the development of the soul anyway. So even though it's skipping the soul, so you know, it's commonly understood that the soul forms the bridge between the personality layer and the infinite kind of non-dual layer. But when we start dialing up, you know, the non-dual, and in a lot of the mystery school world, there's a lot of talk about the dark, and they're not talking about like the dark like Dracula, they're talking about the emptiness. The more we bathe in that, the more the soul journey is accelerated, and ultimately to its completion, where the soul realizes it doesn't exist and is part of the whole universe and so on. But for me, I'm in a place where I'm identifying a lot as being a soul on planet Earth who is able to drop into void, emptiness, non-dual reality with relatively increasing ease. But I don't live there. I'm not operating my day-to-day state typically from like oneness of like, I'm not looking at you right now going, you're me. But I have plenty of those moments in my life, and I feel like that veil through those like sort of non-dual practices, particularly, and you know, DMT and other things, has gotten way thinner, where it's like, oh, I just went out of the way and I realized the ocean and thing, we're all one, or that kind of thing is more accessible for me because of those practices. So I think, because I was trying to reconcile that a bit when I first did your retreat, I was like, oh, I'm really drawn to this, but it's kind of contradicting this other soul path thing I've been getting into. And now that we're a year later and I'm further down both of those paths, I'm like, nah, it's all, you know, yes, the black hole is ultimately going to fuck up your sun, but it's also the reason your sun has somewhere to be in, and it's fostering the whole journey, and it's kind of this, and your little planet goes around the sun, and it's all in perfect harmony. But knowing, this I have a big thing about people knowing why they're doing what, not like on a micro obsessive level of like, well, why would I sit down and meditate at this moment? But on the terms of like, we now are in a reality where we have infinite practices. Whereas like if you grew up in a village in India, I'm guessing the practices you've got are the ones from the traditions in your neighborhood. Whereas if you're like a Celtic pagan in fucking, 800 BC, your spiritual practice is going to be the forest and the shamanic and the whatever that's around you. And if you're a monk in Europe in 13th century, it's going to be prayer and reflection and whatever. Whereas now it's like, we can almost access fucking any of it, which is amazing. But it's also like, well, how do you dine at that smorgasbord, And I think what I'm hearing from you is this identification as the heart as a central point and non-dual reality as a state that is what we're working with and what we're diving into. Once you've got that, you can go, yeah, well, Eckhart Tolle is also on this. And clearly the same sort of awakening happened to him as a bunch of these other guys, because what he's talking about is the same. Whereas we drop in this person's teachings, it's like, yeah, that's different shit. You're cultivating something else if you do that, which is not wrong. But it's like, I remember when I started learning Kung Fu as a kid, as a late teenager, this praying mantis Kung Fu style. And there was another praying mantis Kung Fu, which was completely different. And when the guys would come from that school, my old master would be like, that footwork is wrong, boy. That's not how we do it. And it was like, oh, you've got the elbow out school. You're going to get hit a lot in this place, because we're the elbow in internal energy school. And you guys are like the bullshit style as far as our tradition is considered. And I remember being like, oh my God, and then I go and learn kickboxing, and it's like, it's all about bouncing and flowing. And like, if you bounce in Mantis Kung Fu, you get told off. It's like, we don't bounce in here, We like sink and we're gripping the ground and we're static and then we strike, versus like, this guy's hopping around. And I'm like, but they kick really hard. It's like, yeah, it's a different set of principles. And there is a macro set of principles obviously governing the whole fucking thing. But if you just did a bit of Kung Fu and then went and learned Muay Thai, unless you understand like human fucking movement on a really good level, you don't know that. You're just like, so is it right to sort of stand on my toes and my feet, or is it more the heels or whatever?
There would be core elements like mindset, strength, agility, discipline that hold that art form together, even though the art is different,
Totally. And they'd be like focusing on something versus focusing on nothing versus scanning. It's like, why are we doing all that? I'm going to jump a little to the side. In the bubbles that I'm in, which are kind of far reaching, but there's a lot of the same stuff. The word tantra has become very synonymous for sacred sexuality. That's basically what it means to, like, I don't know how many thousand people, but a lot of people, that's now what it means, right? And when I'm like, cool, this is like tantric meditation, I'm not thinking we're going to do like cock massage at your, I have a full awareness, because I'm coming from like Eastern philosophy of what I'm coming for. But I would love if you could maybe tap a little bit into that subject of like, we're talking about tantric meditation and tantric practice in the West that has come to mean a certain thing, which is not the thing we're talking about. Could you maybe touch on how that's happened? Why? What's going on there? Maybe from your point of view.
Yeah, I think when I first learned the Tantra kind of style and the meditations and about Hridaya and the non-dual Shaiva Tantra that underpins the retreats that I run. I was only 22, so I hadn't really I hadn't been exposed to very much spirituality at all. I'd been doing Bikram yoga, but I had heard Tantra in the most vague pop culture references. So even sacred sexuality, I wouldn't even know what that meant. So I started it with a kind of with a different perspective that someone else might know about Tantra as sacred sexuality and come into the retreat. So yeah, I would be like, for me, Tantra, it's just kind of what Hridaya taught, and it was, so right now in the spirituality scene, there's two kind of obvious schools, and one is Kashmiri Shaivism or non-dual Shaiva Tantra. Like, that really has blown up to be the real Tantra, the real sacred Eastern mystical Tantra. And then there's the Western Neo Tantra, which is all sacred sexuality and like these embodiment spiritual practices, and very much like yoga, rooted in the transnational yoga phenomenon that is born out of the Theosophical Society mostly, and then Krishnamacharya and Patabi Joyce, and how they brought forward Ashtanga yoga and normalized asana practice in the West in such a huge way. So there's like the whole, to be honest, it's all yoga, all Tantra, it's all kind of, it's underpinned from a Western model, and then there's that Eastern model, and the one that is really predominant there is the non-dual Shaiva meditation, consciousness, one non-dual meditation techniques. And that's where I started. But both are so valid and both are so relevant, and both can be annoyingly snobby and both can be ineffective in their own rights, and both can be effective in their own rights. So yeah, I probably wouldn't like, I might drop it a little bit as more of a packaging tool or a marketing tool to be like, yeah, look, it is also tantric what we're doing, but I wouldn't call my retreats a tantric retreat because of the confusion that, like you said, you don't like, it's like me and my mom running the retreats in Margaret River. Like, no, it's not. Yeah. Coming for a linga massage and stuff like that. So yeah, the tantric philosophy is really just the way that I bring it into our retreats is through actually a fair bit. I don't bring it through too strong. I haven't been a scholar, because Tantra is so broad in its origins, and the philosophy is so diverse. There's so many schools. In no way would I'm too picky to say that I'd be an expert, or I would say that I'm a practitioner and a scholar in many ways, have read a lot of the texts, have studied a lot of the different teachers who are the Sanskritologists and things who are bringing these things out. And, Swami Lakshmanju, who is in the 20th century, I've studied a lot of it, have practiced it in depth. But something more, I wouldn't say that I'd be an expert in it or even kind of brand my things as being Tantra, with there being so many holes there. But something like yoga, where I do feel like the reach of my studies is really broad, really deep into its origins, really have watched how it's transformed beyond, and being a practitioner of yoga for so long, and can see a lot of the pitfalls and like classical yoga is one thing. Classical tantra is many different, it could refer to many different schools. Classical yoga is a very specific philosophy, and it has one root text, you know, and it has all of its influences, and it had, which are all interesting, but I believe that that's something that I've dedicated a good 2 years solid of my life of really breaking down what is classical yoga and what were the forces that shaped it. Because more than I would ever be interested in an actual school and a philosophy are what are the forces that shaped it, because I'm obsessed with context, you know, like otherwise the way that we work in our societies, we pull everything out of context, but the meaning is actually in the context and in the forces that shaped and formed it. And obviously the forces that shaped and formed classical yoga are much smaller than the ones that formed tantra 800 years later, which includes just its, you know, then it goes also transnational. There are other forces from countries around, which it's the same thing with yoga, but yeah, it's a slippery slope with the whole tantra scene. And I'm too OCD to, you know, to be that messy and to be calling something like that tantra. But I would definitely say that, you know, Hridaya, the spiritual heart, and some of the meditation techniques, and also some of the philosophies are Shaiva Tantra philosophies, and I'm happy to call them that. And a lot of people are really interested into it because it's exquisite, you know, and it's a lot of times non-dual philosophy is a spiritual practice which is purely philosophical, and that is absolutely powerful and incredible. And it's a way of you know, doing your spiritual practice by reconfiguring and exploring things with the mind, like, oh, okay, like, who is the seer, who am I, and all of, you know, the philosophical questions and understandings that can bring about a spiritual insight. But what I really love about the tantric practices is that they're philosophical and they're applied, and the spiritual practice has both technical approaches that include the energy, the body, the emotions, and all levels of the experience, as well as the philosophical approaches that reconfigure and transform and enlighten your mind. Like, they also, it includes the body, and that's just, it's just richer and exquisite. And for us, we're looking for that fullness of experience, and also we're more entitled than ever to a fullness of experience. We have access to all of these tools and traditions. It makes a lot of sense for me. I love including little tantric flavors and practices and philosophies into the retreat. And of course, it just fits so well, you know?
Yeah. For me, the practices I've done with you has really helped, you know, a lot of pieces that I already had, but to really unify my meditation and my quote unquote yoga, meaning like posture practice, to really start fusing those together has been a really big thing. Where I, you know, how I ended up at your first retreat was like, I would have this conversation every year of like, should I go back and do a Vipassana? And after like 5-6 years of embodiment style, sacred sexuality, movement training, whatever, it's like, oh man, I don't want to fucking sit all day for 10 days. Like, I really love how much I know I'll clock up some solid practice in that space. But one, it's become not my preferred meditation practice, even though it gave me some great foundations. Like, there's no argument that clocking a couple 10-day retreats somewhere in your journey of any fucking kind, you'll just get more hours under your belt, right? So that gave me something. But there's been this sense of like, I know that half of my journey will be me fighting with my body. You know, it'll be me going, oh fuck, let's open through that. Okay, well, let's witness that my knee is really unhappy with this. And it just didn't feel like actually the fastest path for me. But I'd still have this conversation, but I know I'll get some good sitting done, you know? And I might even do different meditation than they're telling me to do, because, you know? And then when I clocked a little bit about what the content of yours was, and then to come and do it, and, you know, in a resort with like alternating between like hatha and then meditation and then yin. And it was like, after 2-3 days, I would get confused around like which ones were a meditation sit and which ones were a yoga sit, because some silent sitting happened, but some movement happened and some posture. And it would be like, I'm like, these are the same fucking thing. You know, this is just the same practice approach from different gateways. And that, you know, even though I do other practices at home as well, that sort of blurring of those boundaries really came through into like, my movement practice is actually my qigong practice, which is actually my meditation practice, which is actually magical practice. And it's like, oh fuck, these are all the stuff that I'm really vibing with is all laid into each other. They're just different gateways in. You know, that's what I really got from merging those things. And, you know, my own retreats, a lot of my favorite teachers, a lot of disciplines that I've learned, they're really fucking hardcore, and they make you do shit for 12 hours a day with very few gaps, and it pisses me off. And some part is definitely, yes, it helps you break down your ego, you know, like since the landmark days, they put the chairs really close together so everyone gets their issues triggered and they get some shit, and you can't leave only for short breaks and blah, blah, blah. And I get it and I honor it. And I made a decision in my own containers and spiral practitioner, and even more so in my more advanced stuff, that like, there's time to breathe. There's time to daydream, you know. There's time for people to have chats on the breaks and let the information percolate. And actually, the more I've tweaked my own containers, the more I've seen that in the downtime is where a lot of the learning sinks in. Or, you know, okay, I've been trying a new meditation technique and I'm not really getting it. So the fact we're going to do some movement in the next section, actually sometimes during that movement, which maybe I'm comfortable with, those techniques kind of sink in more. And I really enjoyed that and really got some confirmation. Like, I ran a retreat it was called Wealth Spiral, but it was a magical wealth retreat. And I went for the maximum time and space. I was like, yeah, we'll do ritual. Yeah, we'll do process. Yeah, we'll do creative. We'll do visioning. We'll do business circles. We'll do all this stuff. But I want most of all to give the transmission of wealth and of that your vibration is more important than what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So actually, you staring out at the dolphins jumping around in the water for half an hour, you having a 3-hour lunch and meeting those 2 other chicks that you've got a resonance with, that's where a lot of the gold is happening. And I think being in your containers, I was like, yeah, like, you know, we did a lot of practice too. It's not like it wasn't like we only barely meditated. We did a shitload of meditation and movement, but I'm getting massages on my break. I'm still holding silence, but I'm in a resort, which was a real nice reflection of what I'm constantly trying to do, which is blend the two worlds. I'm also big on spirituality and wealth sitting in the same container. So the fact that you could be at a resort while you're clocking up some really pleasurable meditation hours was really good for, you know, really enjoyed that. So I just wanted to feed that back to you. Yeah. I wonder if you have anything further on that.
Yeah, I think, so much, you know, about the Vipassana as well. I also appreciate the container of the Vipassana, but it's old school. It's not being revamped. And I know that essentially it is about a non-dual reality, or you can make it about that, but I don't think the Vipassana technique, it's a direct path. And what I love about the silent retreat that I run is that it offers a continuous reminder about the direct path. So at any moment you can touch into, you know, the absolute stillness, the black hole, and just, you can be as deeply connected there, but you can also be as connected to all of the other completely relevant parts of, you know, your person, your life, your circumstances, the journey that you're on. You know, they're held in equal reverence and they're pointed to equally the entire time. Where I think a lot of other practices, they're not non-dual, or they don't have that non-dual underpinning. So I don't know if that was, maybe I missed what Vipassana was teaching about, but in my experience, it was, like you said, it was about clocking up these deconditioning hours almost, but without offering that depth somehow.
I mean, I've got a good friend, Simon Thakur, who he's read a lot of this primary texts and, done a lot of practice and a lot of different practices. But when he refed me back his read on Vipassana, which he's basically saying is not 100% getting taught in those containers, there's a lot deeper access. There's a lot more emphasis on, say, pleasure and the concentration, like taking the pleasure of each breath, the pleasure of whatever, which is certainly not emphasized in the containers I've been in. And it was a lot, I feel like it's a flawed, but still awesome foundational model. And often for me, just to clock up the discipline of sitting, I think is one of the best things it offered me, because when I stuck with my Vipassana for years because that was what I had learned. I'd done the most hours of, because I'd done like 3 Vipassanas or whatever. So I was like, well, I know this, I got this technique good, I can do it. But someone gave me, a Zen anti-meditation by Shinzen Young, which is basically very little instruction other than like, allow everything. Notice if you start to, notice the intention arising to control your attention. And if that arises, drop it. So basically allow everything. And if you realize you're starting to focus on something on purpose, stop it. And it was so hard at first. But after a few weeks of just 20-minute sits, I started to realize how many lazy automatic habits I picked up from Vipassana. Like, I'm scanning my elbow. Whoop-de-doo. It's like, for what fucking reason? I don't know. I'm just scanning my elbow because that's what you do. Whereas this Zen practice was so much more alive in like, you're just forced to watch, and there's no wrong moves. So you can't, so you're not like, oh, I'm watching the wrong thing. It's like, no, that's where you went. That's where you went. Just don't control it. And then it's like, oh, and I'd really struggle with the first sort of 5-10 minutes, but so often 20 minutes or half an hour into that sit, I'm fucking dissolved into now, I watched a few things, they spun into other things. And since there's no control energy, I sort of follow my mind till it kind of runs out, and it's like, whoa, this is like, so deep,
You wouldn't be able to do that without the discipline that you would never have been able to do that. But that's so interesting. Something that you just pointed to, one is like the habit and one is the aliveness of being conscious. And I think Vipassana sets up habits so quickly, and they're healthy habits. Habits that are supported for meditation practice, like your capacity to sit and your discipline and dedication to the practice. But that can't be all. Like that's gotta be 50%, and you need to also develop that skill and the refinement of meditation and attitude and aliveness and consciousness. And in there, I think it's not always talked about how rich that field is of consciousness practices. Like you said, whether it's about pleasure or just anything that points awareness back to itself.
Yeah.
That isn't about setting up habits of concentration and effort.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know what I want to ask you. Let me just ask it, and I'll throw my side on after you because I don't want to flavor the conversation. What are your thoughts on the term spiritual bypassing?
I think it's a rich topic.
Mm-hmm.
Not something that I've spoken to, like I haven't dedicated, a real articulation to it or anything, but my thoughts on spiritual bypassing right away are, that it's a pitfall, on the spiritual practice, the spiritual path. And I think it could be a term that is used to refer to many different things, but I would use it to refer to people, and this is a common way that it's used to refer to things, is a way of people using spiritual concepts or ideas as a justification for bypassing personal work.
Nice.
To do.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I think spiritual bypassing, it's so nuanced where it is actually on a practical level just one hair's breadth from the actual practice of direct spiritual practice. So dropping it all and being present to something deeper than what is in front of you and what you're seeing is part of it, is part of the practice. And I think maybe there's nothing there's nothing wrong. Spiritual bypassing is actually something that I teach as a method that I recommend, except when it's set up as a habit unconsciously.
Yes. Beautiful. Yeah, I asked because I've had this, what I see is, so the two sides or the polarities that I see in the spiritual new agey realms, with that ultimately I see one take off tantra is unifying these sides is basically consciousness versus embodiment, and I feel like the consciousness realm has dominated what we thought spirituality is for a long ass time, and then with the resurgence and emergence of focus on air quotes feminine practice, movement, dance, deep feeling, emotion, catharsis, a lot of the shamanic sort of stuff and the shamanic tantra that is the kind of stuff which I do a lot of and love, but also all the goddess trainings, all the, all we could say that most of those are more leaning towards embodiment as that's what they think spirituality is. And which is cool. And there's definitely a potent path there. And my path has become about both over time, even though I was definitely a consciousness dude forever. And then probably 2013, 2014, sexuality, movement, body, all that sort of stuff came in more and more and more. And then my current path has been about inner marriage, which is how to bring equal amounts of, the masculine, feminine, the consciousness and the embodiment, any two polarities you want, the light and the dark, the body, the mind. We're trying to bring those together has been a lot about my practice. So from there, I see a lot of, how do I categorize the groups? Anyone who's identifying with the feminine, anyone who's identifying with maybe even activist type movements, maybe the trauma-informed scene, a lot of these places, there's a lot of different categories who would use the term, but I see the term spiritual bypassing sometimes thrown with exact accuracy. Yes, that person is using a piece of philosophy that they don't really embody to the level that they're claiming in the thing they're saying, and it's handy to go, hey, like when someone speaks in kind of non-dual type of language, but they're not in that state when they're saying it.
That's super obvious when you see that.
Right.
Or actually, I don't know.
So I borrow your car without permission and go, yeah, but we're all one,
Obvious.
Whereas if you had a little kind of cracked open master in your house who took the car, he might literally be operating from a place of like, yeah, well, from where he's sitting, we're actually all one. Like I can fucking see it in his eyes. There's no one here. It's almost like life force itself borrowed my car. What am I to say? He really, versus like, someone's slacker boyfriend who's like, baby, we're all one being, like it's like, that is not the level you were operating from when you made that decision. You're using a concept you have a mental grasp of that you're not in that state when you do the thing. To me, that's spiritual bypassing. Great. Call that out, But I seen articles and it's like, Eckhart Tolle is spiritual bypassing. And I'm like, I believe he's in that state. I listen to this guy talk and when it hits me, I fucking dissolve, like I'm not faking it. I don't have a vested interest. I just know that when I listen to him and a few other people, the sense of who I am dissolves and I feel myself in the present, and a lot of things that hold meaning and a lot of constructs, a lot of concepts that hold meaning, they really don't when I'm in that place. Like and it's not, and it is an escape. It is a consciousness path through to non-duality. But the idea that like he's spiritual bypassing to like get away from his problems, I mean, it's kind of true because he was like suicidal and in pain and something just cracked. But the phrase to me diminishes like this person is a fucking vortex. Have a look at this guy. He's a fucking vortex to another dimension. He's not spiritual bypassing. That's just what his gift is, you know? And, you know, how embodied is this guy? How good in bed would this guy be? There are other questions, you know, how present in his guts or his anus or his toes is he? I don't fucking know. But it seems like a really low level grasp of what some of these states are. Just basically, you could try to write off all non-dual access as, well, that's just spiritual bypassing, you know. I got to be right here, right now, and it also flows on, in my experience of a story, into like, you know, I have taught and share a lot of tools for integrating wound, integrating emotional body stuff, releasing trauma, letting go of the past, that kind of stuff. And what I see are results where people completely integrate, say, a narrative around a wound or a bad thing that happened or a victim bully story. Like it integrates, it's gone. They're not pretending it's not there. They're not using some technique to hide from a wound. The wound has permanently healed and we've moved on. But a lot of people haven't witnessed that or experienced that. So there's this other piece of like, the spiritual bypassing piece is dangerous because it negates the victim and it negates trauma, and it's sort of, yeah, do you know what I'm saying? This is a narrative I'm kind of picking up on, like, that's spiritual bypassing. And so.
But isn't it the case that everything that I was just sharing about the parts of the practice that I love and the things that I weave into retreat, I think they're called spiritual. I think that's what spiritual bypassing is. It is about bypassing your personal experience, bypassing the soul experience, bypassing the emotions, and touching something deep inside yourself that is none of those. I really believe, and I feel in my own practice, there is a bit of a duality, and there is, exactly like you said, there's a consciousness practice and there's an embodied practice. And I believe that they can marry totally, but what are you marrying? Those two different things in some ways. And of course, in the end, they're the same thing. And you might call that still a consciousness practice and like an embodied consciousness practice. But I think you need to have skill in both, and you should definitely not be using the wrong one at the other one at the wrong time. So I think it's so personal. I think, how could you say, I think if we want to be using the word spiritual bypassing as a criticism in order to like help Eckhart Tolle, you know, hoping he might see that comment and he might have a reflection, you know, that we should really use it.
An anal massage or something, you know, just really bring him in, bring him down.
How could you say that is for sure not relevant for him? You know, that might be something that would be an advantage for him in some way. You know, you don't know. Yeah. Yeah. And I think if we're going to use it to call out other people, if we're spiritual at all, it should be out of, you know, loving respect and wanting to help them.
Yeah.
Right. It should be really loose, but I think we should be really firm with a very sharp sword, using that term in ourselves. Am I bypassing? Am I doing the right thing? You know, inside me, I feel like I have, you know, a pretty coherent and a sensitive spiritual practice. If I'm doing something and I'm trying to feel something that there's, you know, there's nothing to feel there, or I'm supposed to be doing something else. I'm trying to think about something that I'm supposed to be feeling, or I'm trying to feel something that I'm supposed to be thinking about. Like, I think we really have to be really have a bit more discernment, and this is the only place that we can actually do the work. So if you're trying to get work done in the world and trying to change the world, don't like throw knives out there. Like, he's not even looking at you, and you're also confusing other people. Yeah. And no one's listening to you. Like, inside myself, am I leaving my body when I should be right here? And am I in my body but not in love? You know, like not offering myself loving compassion? Or am I in a place where I don't need loving compassion? I just need pure feeling, you know, like raw, like just feeling those different levels. And I think people don't realize that spiritual bypassing, you don't want to call it that, but you want to call it like consciousness practices are they're a part of my practice at least. And I think that it offers depth and it offers depth to the embodiment practices.
Oh, totally. In the same way that, having done my what would I call it? My Tantra chick immersions of 2012 to whatever, and hanging around this really kind of Shakti tribe, I'd meet kind of some really integral theory meditation bros. And I'm like, whoa, there's not a lot of juice here. This guy is very clear and very sharp, it's just like a walking ajna. It's like, hey, and it'll be like, hey bro, have you ever considered doing ecstatic dance or lifting some weights or I don't know, we could have a fight. I think that'd be really good for you, just something, and just be like, this is.
But you don't know, maybe they have nothing to embody and integrate in their body. You just don't know. Same with Eckhart Tolle, maybe it did get wiped off. It's just so hard to tell. And I think with the way that things are changing all the time, just with how the world is changing, the collective is changing, each individual, the changes that I see in myself, I'm like, fuck, I'm not who I was a couple of years ago. Something has stayed the same, and something continues to deepen on the exact same linear trajectory. But my whole spiritual practice is completely changed. Yeah. And I feel like an absolute novice in so many areas that I think are so important. How can I comment on other people's if they practice and if they're spiritually bypassing? I think it's very hard to tell from the outside. I did say it's very it's obvious when people are, but then I was like, but it's not obvious because you don't know. But then, like you said, hey, I borrowed your car, or you borrowed your own car. We're all one, or those things are kind of obvious. But otherwise, it's hard to see inside people's experience and the depth. I mean, you definitely get clues from the outside. It's not impossible.
With the kind of mystery school crew that it's it's group soul, so it's not full oneness. It's we're becoming one soul. So I'll eat someone's sandwich and be like, group soul, bro. This is my sandwich. It's
group sandwich.
Yeah, totally, group sandwich. I feel like we covered some good places. I got one last little one.
Okay.
Your school's called Spanda. Could you download a little bit about what that word means, why it's called that, what that means? It's a very interesting word.
Yeah, so Spanda it's coming from the Kashmiri Shaivism tradition, or it's a Sanskrit word that means to tremor, throb, vibrate. And it's one of these beautiful tantric, the non-dual tantric philosophy points at how essentially everything is one, or essentially everything is consciousness. And I loved how Hridaya explains this idea of vibration and consciousness from the non-dual tantric perspective. I don't know if you remember, it is in retreat, we do speak about it. How, of course, we know that everything is vibration, that the whole universe is made out of energy. But what I love is how we can understand that energy on 3 levels. On the level of the individual, on the level of the universal, and on the level of the transcendent. So on the level of the person, we can consider our own personal energy, our life force energy, the things that we take ourselves to be as a person, all of your personal energy, the things that you would say before. And then on a universal level, we do feel the universal energies, things like the ocean of love, or even just understanding that everything is made out of energy, and that connection, that everything is coming from a field of vibration. But I love how this idea of Spanda on a transcendent level, or vibration on a transcendent level. So on the level of consciousness, we can't really speak about a vibration in time and space. We can't really speak about energy because we're talking about the transcendent. yet consciousness is alive. So our being is a kind of aliveness, a kind of vibration. And that's Spanda. So Spanda, understanding this vibratory nature of the reality, connects us all the way from an individual all the way to the transcendent. And it really encompasses this whole non-dual philosophy and non-dual reality that, and I'm sure this is something that you would be well versed in even the magic and the mystery schools, but everything is a doorway into consciousness, because everything is made up of this same thing, whether you want to call it vibration, energy, being, consciousness, existence. It's all the same stuff, but it's changes depending on the observer effect, you know. So if you take this to be my body, then that's actually the reality. It's my body. But if you take this body to be a universal energy, that's what you'll experience, and you can't deny that that's the reality. But if you experience your body as one, if you experience your body as an expression of all that is, and it is all that is, then that's what you will experience, and that will be the reality. So Spanda is like a bridge that connects the personal to the transcendent. And obviously that in retreat, in this deep heart meditation, we access it all inside here, like in the heart. So my heart, the universal energy, and the transcendent, it's all the same thing. And it, you know, in the lived experience, that's when you get that peak experience. And it really quickly, like you said, the black hole experiences, they totally speed up. There are these peak experiences that transform everything very quickly and really make those big shifts. So that's why I love Spanda, and that's a little bit about what Spanda is. It's the vibratory nature of consciousness as it manifests into form and back.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked you that piece. Yeah, that's something that's stuck with me, because that is a big piece of the glue between, I'm revisiting my NLP trainings that I did in like 2009, 2012, you know, and sorting through which bits of this are now outdated, because some of it's really clunky and weird, but some of what I learned and some of the transmission I got was fucking phenomenal, you know. And that, to people like Joe Dispenza and like David Hawkins, who are the contemporary teachers that I love, to the magical hermetic laws from fucking however long ago, to tantric practice, Shakti Shiva stuff. It's all the things that I've been drawn to, this vibratory piece. And as you put, consciousness coming into manifestation through vibration, that's just such a beautiful piece that glues all these things together. And, you know, the Joe Dispenza stuff, it's like dropping into the quantum field, which, you know, I sometimes am uncomfortable when spiritual practices use quantum-y, sciencey language, because I often feel there's bits and pieces that we're getting wrong. But experientially, that fucking happens and it fucking works. And it literally dropping out of the physical form into field of vibrating potentiality.
Well, that's the universal, that's the universal level, you know. And like you said, all of the scientists are going to put different things, and it might mismatch from the way that you've actually felt it as a practitioner. You know, you're like, well, I feel that is a little bit more on that end or that end, but yeah, everyone's talking about it.
Yeah.
For good reason.
I reckon that's a good place to wrap up. Where do people want to follow you or read stuff or check out stuff? Where do they go for?
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to just look up functional spirituality through podcasts. I started up a podcast probably the same time you did, just to get meditation audios and things out there. But I've started to have some conversations, and saying it formally here that you'll be on to chat with me there. And I think the best way would be to search on Facebook functional spirituality. So I'll have a group there, and I give like live teachings, very much like Going Viral with Dane Tomas. And in there I'll be, you know, doing little mini retreats and free stuff for Facebook, because Facebook deserves it. Somehow, all of our free content. So yeah, I think there would be a good place. And yeah, I'm active on social media, so just search my name, Ava Irani. You should be able to find me.
Amazing. Thank you again for doing this. I feel like that was really lots of pieces in me just switched. I'm like, oh, I can feel all these things right now. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dane. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, super fun. All right. Bye.